Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you are new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled Neighbor and the Shared Fence. Last year, my wife and I inherited a house and some land from her uncle after he passed away. She had not spent much time there in many years, but we were excited to fix it up and start our family in the cute home. We were living in an apartment with our very young daughter and were looking forward to having our own house to create memories in. Unfortunately, one of the very first memories I will have of our new house is dealing with this super weird and suspicious neighbor. We had only been there for about 10 minutes when he came outside and started rambling some nonsense about property lines. He kept saying that he hoped I would be more reasonable than my wife's Uncle Larry had been about the fence. When I asked him what he meant, he stated that the fence we share is actually on his side of the property and that he wanted to remove it and plant some trees. I honestly did not think much of it, and the idea of some trees separating the two of us did not seem too bad. After all, the neighbor, Amos was his name, had a bunch of weird decorations and items in his yard that he must have felt were attractive because we certainly didn't. One thing was a 4-foot tall statue of Mickey Mouse. For the life of me, I don't understand why he had that. I brush off the conversation and say that we can talk about it later and come to an agreement after we had moved everything in. The home needed some work and we still had a few months left on our apartment lease, so we decided that we would slowly fix the place up and move things over later. I had hired some help to work on the house while also enlisting assistance from friends and family. This was about 6 weeks after we inherited the property. I was a little surprised when I showed up for the first time in over a month to see that the fence separating our yard from Amos had been torn down and there were some new trees planted a few feet further onto our property than the fence had originally been. I found this to be pretty annoying considering I had told the neighbor that we would discuss this another time. Apparently, he either misheard, chose to ignore me, or is going to play dumb. Amos was not there and I was busy and tired, so I thought I would deal with this another time. However, I did decide that I needed to find a surveyor to have in my corner of the ring when this situation turns into a full-blown boxing match. A few weeks pass and I finally get to meet with the surveyor about the property lines. I felt confident considering I had Larry's deed and other paperwork showing where the original property was. The surveyor was great, he was quick to the point and gave me exactly what I needed to dispute this issue with Amos. I honestly did want peace with my neighbor, but I was worried he would make a big stink when I showed him the surveyor's results. Conveniently, Amos must have seen us outside that morning and realized what was up. He came out and seemed frazzled, his hair a mess and only wearing his robe and slippers. Amos approached me and asked what we were up to, which is when I explained that I had a surveyor check out the property divide so that we can know exactly where the yards ended. I also mentioned that I was wanting to put up a new fence now that he tore down the old one and that I would need him to remove his trees from my side of the property as well, unless he just wanted me to keep them. Amos huffed and puffed and proceeded to state over and over that he knows where the property line is and that he has his own surveyor to prove it. I asked him to please show me what documents he has to support his claim. His response was grumbling and he spun on his heel and went back into his house. I did not hear from him for a few days. Later that week, I received a phone call from my contractor saying that he was approached by Amos asking him to tell me that he had his surveyor paperwork to discuss. I obliged and met him at the house where he showed me some unprofessional and strange-looking paperwork by some surveyor that he hired. I asked for a copy and showed it to the gentleman I had hired and received a funny email back, laughing and stating that the documents were not done by any surveyor he had ever seen or heard of. I am a little annoyed now. I'm trying to have patience with this man, but now he is just lying and trying to get his way by falsifying surveyor paperwork. At this point, screw Amos. He has been sketchy this whole time, tearing down fences while he knows we are not there to stop him, and planting trees on my property in order to steal my land. Who does this guy think he is? I had Amos email at this point and sent him a generous letter saying that I would build my new fence exactly where the old one was. I also mentioned that his paperwork was garbage and that I was offended that he would treat me like I was so gullible and stupid. He replied by saying that he would be contacting his lawyer and we would hear from him soon. Too bad for Amos, my brother-in-law is a lawyer and has already been putting together our case, which would be super simple and easy to win. Brother-in-law did not even think we would see a courtroom. There is not much disputing that Amos can do regarding the property line at this point. When his lawyer sent their hilariously weak paperwork to us, my brother-in-law simply squashed him with legal documentation and confirmation of where the property divide is. That is all she wrote for Amos. It was a few days later, but Amos did write an email back to me about how he apologized for the fuss he caused and that he hoped we could come to an agreement about the trees. I told him that there would be no agreement and that I attempted to settle this issue the nice way the first time around and that it was ultimately his loss. I built my 6-foot privacy fence right where the old one was, even a few inches closer to Amos's property, because the original fence was actually a little further over than it had to be. This also meant that I could do whatever I wanted with the trees that he planted too. I decided that I didn't want to waste the pretty young birch trees and that I would just keep them. So now he has a great view of the top of them from over my privacy fence. Oh, and by the way, Ripe Stars, before I forget, I have a quick request. Yesterday I bought a new version of my old microphone, so essentially it's the same microphone, just a newer version, because my old microphone was pretty broken. So therefore I still have to tweak some settings. So in the comments please let me know if the first story that you just heard sounds better than the second one that we are about to read or not. Because I still have to fiddle, especially with the volume settings. Your feedback will be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. The next one is titled Housing Issues. This may paint me in a bad light, but I don't care that much. Just a note that this happened in Poland, also unsure if it fits here more or another subreddit. I am living in a block of flats with a slightly higher standards, meaning we have a gate and our own parking spaces, trash cans, camera system and everything. I work as a programmer and remotely. I am also single and I keep mostly to myself. I try to never harm anyone, not get into any drama, just live slowly and steadily alone, barely leaving home except doing groceries, so my neighbors know me as that homeowner that never causes any problems and is always helpful and polite. One time I had to replace my current bed. It was old, dirty, and I just wanted something better. So I ordered a new bed and dismantled my old one, ready to be taken out. Once every 2 weeks, a truck comes in and checks through the neighborhood to take away all the big things set beside the trash containers. And by the way, Ripe Stars, just to quickly interject, what OP is talking about here, that every few weeks a big vehicle comes through the neighborhood and takes the big things set near the houses, that is actually very common in European countries, and I'm curious if this also happens in the United States. It essentially means if you have something like an old sofa or something, you can put it beside your house and every couple of weeks a truck comes and picks up your old stuff. Anyway, sadly, I live on floor 3, so taking my old bed alone would be just too hard for me alone. I asked my brother for help, but he couldn't have done it tomorrow, so he helped today. Now, before this, our block's terms of service say that you're not allowed to put out big trash except on the day the truck comes. So, not wanting to make any outburst, I asked my favorite neighbor for a favor. If I could put it on his parking spot day before, because, well, I wouldn't be able to do it on the correct day, he gave me a thumbs up. Then I checked with another member of the housing cooperative board if it is fine, since the owner of the spot knows and he also said it is okay for him. I moved on with the plan, my brother came, we moved my old bed outside, occupied the spot and called it a day. That is when the Karen came in. She is around 50 plus years old from the looks, you know, the type that sits the whole day in the window and tries to find something to complain about. She got into my home and tried to explain that it is against our community rules, so I had to have it taken away right now. I, in exchange, tried to explain to her why I did that, how I got approval from people and whatnot. She was not having it. She threatened to call the police on me for littering if I didn't get it done today. I said sure, okay, I guess I'm technically in the wrong here, so I'll just comply. I called private company to take away the bed today. I also specifically went to her home and told her it would be done today. She said it is fine. So the truck arrives, they start taking away bed, and so does the police. Apparently she already called the police without waiting for me to do anything. I am livid and literally panicking, not because I was afraid of a fine or anything, but just because it was the first time in my life that someone did something hostile to me, even though I said I would do what she wants. I explained the whole situation. The police saw no problem. They don't even cite me anything. They just gave me a handshake, pat my back and left. The lady that called the police looks out the window and yells, "Thank you, officers," with a grin. I am ever more upset at this point. I think to myself, you want to perfectly obey the law? Fine, I will make sure you do. I got the community rules from the council and studied them thoroughly to find potential reasons to make her life hell. I see her taking out the trash. I clearly hear glass bottles in the bag. I look out the window. She throws it in the wrong container. I call the community board and bam, your rent went up because you did not comply with our sorting garbage rules. Next day I come back from the groceries. I see her car. She parked a little over the line, so it is basically like taking up 2 spaces. I call the police again and bam, she gets a fine. She walked out her dog in our private space. As I watched her through the window, I saw her dog pooping, but she doesn't scoop it up. Oh, did you just do that? I will call the community board with a complaint. She came to me and wanted to apologize, and now here is the part that makes me look bad. I said, no, I don't accept it. Why? Because I'll admit I'm vindictive to people who try to create trouble for others without a very good reason. I said, all I'm doing is making sure you are following the community rules. Is that wrong? And she scoffed at me something rude and went away. I've been doing that for like 3 months now. A month ago she was kicked off the board for too many rules violations, and today she moved out, but before she did, she made sure to put a bag of trash on my doorstep while I was away. Sad for her, she is stupid and the trash contained a letter with her information on it. So I had the last laugh by reporting it to the police. I know, rules are rules. I was technically in the wrong first for breaking them, but the moment she went out of her way to enforce them and then screw me anyway, that is when the line was crossed. I have no shame for bullying her out of here. I was just doing the God's work and ensuring that the rules are not broken. And by the way, Ripe Stars, I'm not sure what is your opinion about this story, but I think that OP did not really bully the neighbor out of there. He basically just did what she did to him. I'd say that is some pretty good petty revenge content, but still it also makes me sad, because I am fairly certain that there's a lot of great petty revenge and even other revenge content out there on the internet, probably posted in a different language that makes it pretty much impossible to find for us. And the next one is titled An Old Water Tower. So this actually happened to my dad a few years ago. He lived in an area right along the Texas/Oklahoma border in a fairly rural area. My dad primarily worked in pipeline construction. One day, my dad noticed someone had purchased a very large property not too far down the road. Turns out that the new neighbor was actually from the suburbs around Columbus, Ohio, and had just won a lottery prize. The man had not won the jackpot, but had won a smaller prize around $2 million. Well, Ripe Stars, I guess that's a matter of perspective. In Thailand, that would be the jackpot times 3. Anyway, my dad was also originally from Ohio, so he decided to say hello. A few days later, he meets the lotto neighbor. We will call him Jim. Jim starts telling my dad about his dream to build his own self-sustaining homestead far away from the rest of society. Jim was very interested in prepping and convinced of a soon-to-come global societal collapse. He used his lotto winnings to purchase the land and began building his homestead. My dad honestly didn't find this that odd because many people in the area had some tendency towards independence and those prepping shows were popular at the time. About a year later, Jim reached out to my dad to ask for help with a construction project that involved burying a large water tower in the ground. My dad was a little confused but decided to go take a look. Turns out Jim bought an old water tower about 15 feet in diameter and about 15 feet high, for the purpose of reusing it as an underground shelter. Jim had recently completed the build of a prefab home on his property and wanted the water tower buried partially under the new home with a trapdoor built in a closet to access it. My dad immediately thought this was the dumbest thing he had ever heard and proceeded to tell Jim all the potential issues with his plan. Jim cut him off and told my dad that his contractor for the home had basically told him the same, and so had several others he had contracted to try to get them to bury this water tower. However, Jim believed this was simply laziness on their part and had the utmost confidence in his plan. My dad left, but a day or so later Jim contacts him again and asks about paying my dad to let him rent some construction equipment he had on his own property. My dad again goes over with him what a bad idea this is and how no legitimate crew would ever do this for him. Jim brings up using my dad's equipment and illegal laborers. My dad decides, well, if he is determined, might as well make a few bucks off lotto winner Jim. He quotes him some ridiculous price to rent his equipment and says he can ask a guy at work he knows about gathering up a group of Mexican day laborers. Jim agrees to the crazy price and my dad gets in touch with a Mexican friend who had a crew of day laborers. A bit later, my dad asks his friend about how the project is going. He tells my dad how nasty Jim treated the workers, how stupid the whole plan is, and how his specifications for how he wanted this built were completely idiotic. Whenever they would offer up suggestions or point out why something he wanted was wrong, he would essentially shut them down and use a bunch of slurs for Mexicans. So they buried the water tower and built this secret entrance exactly as he wanted, knowing it was completely stupid. He mentioned they only completed the job because Jim was paying them way more than they were used to making. Everyone agreed Jim was a jerk, but all the more reason to gouge your prices and take his money. A year or so goes by when my dad gets a frantic call from Jim. It had rained quite a bit, which was unusual for the area, and now the entire ground floor area of the back of his home was bowed upwards about 2 feet. My dad goes to Jim's and takes a look around, realizing what has happened. Given that they had essentially just buried a large hollow object underneath his home, the rain caused the water tower to be pushed upwards and right through his first floor. My dad explained the situation and Jim immediately lost it, started ranting about how he should have never used those Mexican laborers and how he was gonna make them come fix it. My dad mentioned how that was probably impossible since most of them go back and forth across the border, but Jim was livid. My dad later found out from Jim that his insurance would not cover the damages to his home because he had buried a water tower under it without telling anyone. He mentioned trying to sue the insurance company, but that went nowhere. He also tried numerous times to find the day laborers, but was told you get what you get when you hire illegal workers to do a project that would never have gotten a permit. Over the months afterwards, there was a lot of fallout for Jim and he couldn't even live in his home due to the damage. It eventually was torn down to be able to remove the water tower from beneath it. He burned through his lotto winnings pretty fast, so he didn't have anything left to rebuild it. He ended up selling the land and moving away about a year later. So Ripe Stars, if you haven't already, please leave me your feedback on the audio on today's video. Was the audio better in the first story or in the ones afterwards? Your feedback is very much appreciated and helps me to tweak my audio settings to make them sound perfect. Thank you so much in advance. And Ripe Stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel, but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.